everyone. Welcome to Here We Are, Brattleboro's community weekly talk show. I'm Wendy O'Connell, and here we are today with Nicholas Porter. Nicholas is an Episcopal minister, and he and his wife Dorothy live in Brattleboro, and they are co-founders of Jerusalem Peacebuilders, which is a nonprofit organization, an interfaith organization that he's going to be talking about. So welcome, Nicholas.
Thank you, and thank you for having me on the program.
Yes, we're very glad to have you on the program. So as an Episcopal minister, I was thinking of a few questions, and I know that you went to theology school and did a lot of studying. And I wonder if you could talk about how you came to theology, or how theology came to you.
Wow, it's a big question, but let's see what we can do with that. So I grew up in a religious family, Christian family, and also a family that's historically been religious. And but my parents were very easy and free about that, and no compulsion in religion whatsoever. And I really backed into ministry and backed into the study of theology. My parents really wanted me to be a diplomat, and so starting in high school, I learned Russian and won a National Russian Prize, and then went to a very fine university that at the time had the leading Soviet and East European Studies department in the country, and continued my Russian and then picked up Arabic. But as I got into that more, that sort of backwards movement began, and I began to spend more time focusing on the Middle East, and did much better in those classes than I did in the ones to do with the Soviet studies. So then I focused on that, and then after a time of working in New York, I went and read for a master's degree in Egypt, studying Islamic fundamentalism. And while I was there, living in Cairo, I did a Christmas pilgrimage up to Bethlehem and Jerusalem. And, I sort of showed up in jeans, and you might remember in the days when we had that fashion of sort of a camel hair colored corduroy jacket with sort of wide
whale corduroy,
yeah, and had long hair. And my father gave me the phone number of one person. So I called him. I said, "Join us for dinner, young man. Join us for dinner. Merry Christmas." And I ended up being seated next to Desmond Tutu. And, and having a great conversation with Desmond Tutu and a number of different politicians and diplomats that were in Jerusalem at the time. And at the end of that meeting, or really that dinner, I should say, Desmond Tutu and then the then Episcopal or Anglican Archbishop in Jerusalem said, "We'd like you to come and work here."
Oh, really?
Yeah, and that was really an important step in that backward movement.
And when they said work here, what did they mean?
They meant work at St. George's College, which is an adult continuing educational facility, experiential learning facility in East Jerusalem, and to really be a teaching assistant there. And most of the people there were biblical scholars and people who were frankly much more focused on theology than I was at the time. But I, because of my studies in Egypt, was very au courant with politics and Islamic fundamentalism. It was during the first Intifada, so I helped with what you might say more current events, making sense of current events for people.
And so in some ways you've used a lot of the different things that your parents did want you to do, like diplomacy.
Yes.
Yeah, but they also wanted you to go into the military a bit, didn't they?
Well, no, I ended up doing that myself. After being offered the job in Jerusalem, I wanted to hedge my bets, frankly. So when I was studying in Egypt, I wrote a series of papers looking at some some unusual aspects, let's say, of the war, current war in Lebanon at the time. And one of my teachers, professors, Walid Kazia, who was a Syrian professor, said, I think you'd be good at this. So I went to a staff college, really an officers training college in London for a year, and read with military officers from around the world.
How did you like it?
It was hard. It was very hard. But I did like it. I did some great research, did a lot of research into Syria, which sadly proved to be quite accurate. Current events have shown that to be true. But did a lot of work on Israel-Palestine at the time too. And that has continued to inform our endeavor at Jerusalem Peacebuilders. To understand how to make peace, you have to, I believe, have insight into why people go to war. What are they willing to fight and die for? Well, that's the things we need to focus on to make peace.
So you had an amazing background for doing what you're doing.
Absolutely, absolutely. I know a lot of parents tell young people, study practical things. Well, I'm not sure I studied so much practical things, but I certainly studied extremely useful things. And I was just telling my daughter in the car just a few moments ago, I've had the real privilege of using what I learned in high school and college and graduate school almost every day of my working life.
That's amazing.
Yeah, very thankful for it. Very thankful, very grateful for the education I've had.
Yes, and travel as well. You did a tremendous amount of travel, and still do.
I still do. I still do. And yes, I've traveled. My wife and I have lived in Egypt and Jerusalem twice, London, Paris, Geneva, New York, Connecticut, Brattleboro.
Here we are in Brattleboro. How did you come to Brattleboro?
Well, we came. That's a fun question, because a little bit of the practical and a little bit of the mysterious, I would say.
Always a good mix.
Always a good mix and a lively mix. My wife and I are college sweethearts, so we began to come up to Brattleboro with friends from college in Connecticut. We would drive up to Brattleboro to what was then her grandparents' farm. Once I entered into theological school back in Connecticut, we started to come up here. And I would say in about 1993, right after the Oslo Peace Accords, we had visited here, and the next weekend we were driving down to see some friends in Rhode Island. And as we were driving along, we were talking, wouldn't it be great if we could purchase, grandma's farm and start a program, peace-building program for young Palestinians and young Israelis. And from my lips to God's ear, I think, because literally within a week, we got a phone call from her grandmother's attorney saying, your grandmother needs to sell this place. You have to buy it at market value, but, we want to offer it to you if you want to buy it.
Amazing, yeah.
And, we were young, so we had to scrape together a lot of pennies, but we were able to do it.
And you did it.
And we did it.
And you did it.
And we did it. And we started our peace program here. So it all fell into place very nicely. Very nicely. We were still living in Paris and Geneva, so we would come and visit, and we're gradually improving it. And all the while staying involved with various peace-building activities in Israel and in Palestine, usually around education and health care, and in bringing Westerners there to be educated and learn about what was going on.
All ages?
All really mainly adults, mainly adults, sometimes young people, but mainly adults. And all that sort of bubbled together. And really when we lived in Connecticut, I ran something called the Middle East Forum every spring during Lent for the 6 weeks before Easter. And that was really a public graduate program for anybody who wanted to come to study different topics in the Middle East. And we would have, on a Thursday night, 100 and 150 people coming to that, regularly. Like, they do the 6 weeks.
Wow.
And that really got us to that tipping point. And in about, I'll tell you exactly when. We founded Jerusalem Peacebuilders in 2011 as really an outreach ministry of the church we were leading in Connecticut, and it got traction. A good friend of mine said, you're going to have to be really flat-footed to mess this one up.
That's a nice way of putting it.
It is. That sort of backhanded compliment. And by the time 2012 came around, just two summers into it, we had really reached that fork in the road. Wow. And so we, after about a year of kind of agonizing about it, we decided that God was calling us to this peace work, and that Dorothy and I were going to leave Connecticut and take our kids out of school and move up here to Vermont, and rather than live out on the farm for our young daughters who did not come entirely voluntarily, that we needed a place downtown. So we ended up buying one of these Victorian homes here, one of the painted ladies nearby, that needed quite a bit of work, but it was worth it, and we were happy to contribute to its history and its new life.
And you got to be townies.
And we became townies, which we love.
Yeah.
We love town life. We love to walk everywhere. From our home, we can walk to our church, St. Michael's Episcopal Church, where we're parishioners. We can walk to Latches Theater. We can walk to restaurants. We can walk to shops. We love it.
Yeah, that's so great.
We love it.
Let's talk about the Peacebuilders, because it's so at the heart, I think, of everything that you're doing now.
Sure.
And one question I do have is everything that you have talked about has been part of your ministry. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And maybe you could talk about that, and we'll go into Peacebuilders.
Sure. So Jerusalem Peacebuilders is an interfaith organization, or you could certainly understand it as an interfaith ministry. And that does not mean we're trying to convert any of these young people to be Christians or anything else or other than whatever their family background is, and that involves their own personal choice too. But we understand what we do as being faithful to our relationship to God and Jesus Christ, because that's how we share and express the love of God that we feel in our hearts, is by making these opportunities for lifelong transformation, lifelong new friendships, incredible new purpose in these young people's lives. That opportunity, making that available to them, is really how we really share the love of God we feel in our hearts. And they feel it too.
Yeah.
One of the part of our secret sauce, as one of our co-founders always says, is we use a family model. So we really want to go from 3 families: Americans, Israelis, Palestinians. And then there's a second level to that 3-ness, which is Christian, Muslim, Jewish. And now it has another element, which is Druze, which is the 4th religion in Israel, Palestine. We want them to go from feeling separated to one family. And we do that by having them live in extreme proximity to each other. I mean, they do chores together, they share bathrooms, they're in bunk rooms together. They challenge each other very intensely. It's all choreographed. I mean, there's a bit of a science to this, where they go from really standing back to back with each other to being sort of triggered to stand face to face. And we're really building a new family. And they need that. because peace work is countercultural in the Middle East. In both the Palestinian narrative and the dominant Israeli Jewish narrative is that violence is inevitable and that there is no reliable peace partner. Both sides are saying the same thing. And so if you believe in peace, if you practice it, if you know others who do the same, you're swimming upstream. There's a young man I was just thinking of the other day who studying to be a doctor in a very sort of advanced high school. He wrote me, he gets beat up every day because he won't let anyone around him say racist things about Arabs. You know, getting in a scuffle once in a while, but every day.
Every day. And he's taking that on.
And he takes it on, and he soldiers on, and in part he can soldier on because he has this new family.
Yes.
We do 4 summer programs, soon to be 5 and 6, but in 2018 there'll be 4, exactly right. So youngest people, 14, 15-year-olds in New Haven, Connecticut, and in Houston, Texas. Then a program for 15, 16-year-olds, also in Houston, you know, runs at the same time, but different youngsters and different staff. And then our real flagship program is here, the Leadership Institute in West Bratt, and that's really for 17, 18-year-olds. And that's very intensive, very deliberate. But it's not just summer camp with all the smiles that provokes.
And hot dogs.
And hot dogs, yeah, exactly, and canoeing.
Canoeing, right,
canoeing, which are wonderful things, and our kids do, the teenagers love that. But those summer programs here in the United States are really fed by much more intensive work we do during the school year.
In the schools?
In schools, in Israeli and Palestinian schools, in both in the state of Israel, in the West Bank, and in Jerusalem. And it's really what we're doing with those school programs as well as Model UN programs that we sponsor, is we are constantly looking and trying to get ourselves connected with the most responsive young people. That's what we're looking for. And then we offer those most responsive young people a chance to really get supercharged and come over here in the summer.
So this is not something you sign up for. These are kids that you've been keeping your eye on that are really headed in that direction.
That's right. And our hope is that they'll stay with us for about 4 years, the 3 years of high school with the summers, and then 1 year as a counselor. And you know, if we can hold on to them that long, the chances that they will, you know, so regress and forget and renounce this are almost zero, in fact.
Because it's in their bones.
It's in their bones. It's their friendships.
Right.
It's who they are.
Yeah.
And part of what helps us do that is, yes, we're using that family model, which is the idiom model of Middle Eastern society, so it's patterned very closely. But we really aim for the whole person as well. And that includes having religion as part of our curriculum in our programming. Yes, the practice of it by the different faith practitioners during the program, so others can see it, and religious bigotry and misunderstanding can go down through being there and knowing such a person. But also our clergy educators provide each of these young people, or all of the young people through workshops, with theological tools for their toolbox. So yes, intellectual, yes, social science, yes, social, but also theological, spiritual tools to be peace builders, because we feel if you are not involving religion in the solution in the Middle East, you're not going anywhere. You're not going anywhere.
And how does that work with Americans? It's a little bit different.
It is a little bit different, but the Americans that tend to be interested, that find their way to us, tend to be more religious, I think, from more religious families. And I don't meaning more, that's some sort of funny expression in English. I mean, they are from families that practice their faith regularly, whether that's Jewish, Christian, Muslim. And they're there because Jerusalem, the holy city of Jerusalem, and the Holy Land of Israel, Palestine, is important to their spiritual life and spiritual fulfillment.
Yes.
And they too want to be part of the solution.
And do you think any of that is geographical, in that in the Middle East, religion and that kind of belief systems are so embedded there for so many centuries, and it's different here in the States?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think we could spend much more than the half an hour that we have together talking about that. But in the Middle East, like anywhere in the world, there is a spectrum of belief, of commitment and practice. What we do know for sure is that for most people, the largest element of their identity is a religious identity. So that may not even mean that they practice, but their name says what their ancestors' religion was, where they live, whom they marry, some of their physical features, what they eat or don't eat, is very much connected to their religious identity. So if we're going to bring the transformation of these individuals along, we've got to be going after the whole person.
Right, right.
And you can't be scared of that. And you know what? Well, the nicest thing about this is the kids teach us. This isn't just about, you need to do this and you need to do that and you need to do the other thing. No way. It's just the opposite. And critical youth empowerment, one of the three primary goals of it is to create a learning environment where the power asymmetries are reduced so that it's very collegial between, you might say, the organizers and the educators and the participants. And we love it. It's almost addictive, and most of our educators and volunteers, as soon as their session's over, they're saying, when's next year? What are the dates for next year? So they can get back in.
That's very interesting. And as you're talking to and talking about Peacebuilders in particular, it sounds to me that you've created a kind of dynamic that includes so many different aspects, not only of the person, but of the relationship between the people. And to me, when you talk about an addictive thing, once you get a taste for being connected to people or a taste for understanding something that was beyond you before interacting, I think that seems to be so key to what you're doing.
Absolutely. And one of the other fun things we that was sort of, I want to say, kind of revealed to us. I used to sit on a board at Yale University, and we had a sort of a leadership seminar. We were all taken away, and someone mentioned Joseph Campbell, and I just had one of those moments. A friend of mine in Switzerland had given me one of Joseph Campbell's books, and I could see it right on my bookshelf. Hero with a Thousand Faces, of a Thousand Faces. And that's really about the stages in a hero's journey that are fairly universal across the human experience. Different centuries, religions, cultures, locations, nationalisms, all of that. A story is told in a certain way. So actually we choreograph and design the summer program curriculum like that, so that the young people, without even knowing it consciously, know subconsciously what's expected of them. That they will be heroes.
Excellent, and they're sharing that, and
absolutely,
yeah.
and that's part of the hero's journey.
And it's an archetypal journey, so
yep.
yeah, so
absolutely,
that's wonderful. That's really wonderful. My last question
sure.
to you, unfortunately, there is a last question because we could go on for a while. A few years ago, you did a wonderful thing in the park, at Park Place up here.
Painting for Peace.
Painting a mural. Are you going to be doing a public display of any kind this summer?
Oh, well, thank you for asking. We are. So right now, we've got a couple of things in the works. In fact, a few things in the works. Mm-hmm. I know that I believe it's July 24th, it's a Tuesday, we will be in Wilmington at St. Mary's in the Mountains Episcopal Church there. They have a program called the Red Door Series. It tends to be an artistic series, poetry, music. They have invited our young people to join them there for a public community conversation. I think it's at 6 p.m., where the young people, some of whom this year are poets, will be reciting poetry, joining the local musicians and making some music, as well as leading a public, I would say, conversation about their personal challenges in peace building. Here in Brattleboro, I'm happy to say, we're looking at 2 opportunities, and I hope people will keep an eye out for it, both on this television station, but also in other media outlets like the Commons and the Reformer. We're hoping to have to show a movie, an edgy movie, that will be appropriate but provocative, that our young people will then lead public dialogue groups on the spot. I think we're also hoping to have a much more social thing, maybe with some music and more food and fun down at the retreat farm.
Oh, good.
And those will be places for individuals, for families, for young people, for adults to connect with these young people. I mean, when was the last time you got to connect with 25 young leaders from Israel and Palestine?
Probably at Parks Place a couple years ago.
That's a great opportunity, and I hope everybody will make the most of that.
I think that Jerusalem Peacebuilders is one of those treasures in our community that not a lot of people know about. And to know that that exists, and to know that you are doing public things, I think it's a wonderful thing for people.
Well,
to
thank
be in
you.
touch with.
And one of the things that we're hoping that's going to come out of some of this more public interactions is that people who are stalwart about peace and reconciliation in the Middle East will help us here understand how we can really open Jerusalem Peacebuilders up as more of a community resource.
Oh, that's a great idea.
And involve others. We only have a few spots for Americans. Right? I mean, we have maybe 3 or 4. Well, you could say that's a start, and it is a start. But how does that? How can we find a way to put what we do and what we know and who we have on our team at the disposal for the betterment of life in Brattleboro and the families.
Absolutely,
here.
Nicholas. And I think it's just my gut feeling. I think you're going to be working on that.
I hope so.
And I think it's going to
be
happening here in town. And we are glad for it. We are so glad. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been a joy to share a little bit with you today.
It was wonderful to hear. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And thanks to all of you for tuning in. We will see you next week.